Hey folks, so as many of you may have seen, Kabam decided to give us 2 keys to Grandmaster's Gauntlet for Alliance War compensation. Now, I know a lot of people have strong feelings on whether that's actually a good form of compensation, especially given its timing. Um, Personally, I love it. I wasn't even in an Alliance for the time where Alliance War was having all its downtime issues, but that's besides the point. So there's been a renewed interest in Grandmaster's Gauntlet now because obviously everyone has another 2 entries, and frankly, the rewards are quite nice. There's 100 generic SIGs there. There's millions and millions of gold, 6-star Nexus crystals and shards, which are a bit on the lesser side, but the T5B and the 1 to 2 gems are huge, in my opinion at least. So because of that renewed interest, I figured now would be a great time to make a short video going over my team that I just used. I just completed my run earlier today, and how this was my cheapest run yet, coming in at under 5 revives in total. And that's even in spite of my extremely poor planning and having very few potions to heal up with, minimal boosts. I didn't even have a mutant 200% power back for Prof X. I was using a 150%. But it's a very, very much a doable quest now if you play well or even just decently, or like a scrub like me. But with a team like this, it actually works really well. So let's start going through it, I suppose. Now, there are no wasted slots here. Every single champion has a job to do on this team. And basically, you're going to be able to cover pretty much every single fight really well in this entire quest, except for 2. There are going to be 2 fights where you don't necessarily struggle through, but they're a little bit more dangerous in the sense that you might have to use a revive or 2. And those 2 fights are Killmonger and Void. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it though. Starting off, we have Dr. Doom. That's why Overseer's here. Overseer takes him out extremely easily. It's the first fight, so you can just go over and over again until you get a really strong solo on that. I just kept going until I get 100% Overseer at the end. The next fight you have ahead of you is going to be Terrax. Now that's why Kitty Pryde is here. Initially, in my first few runs, I was bringing along Absorbing Man, but frankly, the only 2 fights I really needed him for were Terrax and Killmonger. And besides that, he wasn't really all that useful compared to my other choices. So I decided to replace him with Kitty Pryde after I ranked forward her yesterday. Now, with Terrax, it can seem really daunting, but obviously what you want to do with Kitty is just really abuse her Awakened ability that lets you take no damage while you're phasing. What I did, at least, I just went for a 3-hit backdraft, dash-in combo, so I keep triggering my phase. Go for 2 L3s. Make sure you use the L3s while he still has his rock field active. That way, you're not giving him a ton of power. Use those passive incinerates to build up your temperature, and then just be very aware when his rock field does run out. Frankly, I did not hit him at all when his rock field wasn't up. When his rock field isn't up, you want to back off, you want to bait the specials, you want to make sure he uses them before he gets to 3 bars, because he will gain power fast, and I did have like 1 or 2 runs with air quotes, since it's only the second fight. I did have 1 or 2 of those runs ended because he got to 3 bars, despite me baiting. And I didn't get the phase timing right with Kitty. Now, the next fight is Vision. You can do this with Kitty Pryde. I think Legacy even has a video doing it with Kitty, and she's really effective. But I frankly felt it was a little bit safer just doing it with Overseer. Now, obviously, with Overseer, what you're really going to want to make use of is his taunt on the heavy attack. Little piece of advice, always try to activate that taunt before he uses an L1, or try to activate that taunt to use it on his L1 rather than his L2, because if you, let's say he's generically used his L1, like vanilla, you haven't taunted him or anything, and then he uses his L2. Next, he's going to want to use his L3. But if you can get the taunt up and you can get him to use his L1 while your taunt is up, increasing the chance he launches it, that then means you can now get him to launch his L2 again, even when the taunt isn't on him. Because, well, he needs to follow his cycle of 1, 2, 3. So what you want to do with Overseer is you just want to play it slow, you want to play it safe, you want to make sure he always has a taunt on him whenever he's near his L1, because you really want him using those L1s. And if he does, you'll be completely fine. MCoC is a really interesting one, right? Now, I think this is probably one that, even for me, raised a bit of a red flag at the beginning of, okay, how am I going to deal with this? Then I realized, wait a minute, I have Professor X, and he is bloody OP. Now, I will actually post a video I recorded doing the MCoC fight with Professor X pretty much right after this video, just because I have the clip ready, no voiceover, nothing like that, but just a showcase. And all you really want to be doing is using your falter like a currency. You should be treating your falter like it's a means to gain power and it's a means to gain channeling charges. My apologies. And the way you want to do that is you want to back him up to his side of the arena, right up against the wall. You want him to have minimal power, and then you want to hit his block and then immediately just go for a heavy attack. Because what will likely happen is he'll hit in, and if he hits in, he triggers your falter, and you can just start, heavy chaining him in the corner to build a lot of power and a lot of channeling charges. And alternatively, he won't even hit into you, and your falter won't be triggered, and you can still do what I just said, and you still save your falter. Past that, it's just launching a bunch of L1s, because obviously he has a damage penalty if you try to use your special 2, or special 3 for that matter, so it's better if you just use your L1s. Next up is Spider-Ham. Now, this is also a pretty generic fight, frankly. I think I've seen people cover this with Professor X over and over again. Make sure you have 25 channeling charges before you try to hit into his block, anything like that. You can very easily counter spams L1s to build channeling charges. Remember, Professor X also shuts off any power gain and special locks the opponent when he's in his big channeling nuke phase. So you're going to be completely fine using your specials, assuming you only use them when you have 100 channeling charges. It's frankly a very easy fight. There are a lot of guides out there on this matchup specifically for Professor X. So if you're unsure, I would encourage you just to go and watch one of the tens or even hundreds of videos out there. And I'm just lazy, so I can't really be asked to explain it anymore. My apologies. Now, next up you have Weapon X. That's his name. Yeah, that's why that's one of the reasons why Nimrod is here. It's a very easy Nimrod fight. Frankly, he's gonna play very aggressive. You can do 4-hit combo dashbacks, intercept him with your medium. You'll be completely fine, honestly. Again, there are probably a lot of videos out there of him doing it. There's not really anything to be aware of in the Weapon X fight, I would say. Yeah, no, nothing really. Frankly, even Kitty Pryde could do this fight, even Professor X could do this fight, and I'm sure there are guides of them doing it out there too. Next up is Thing. My guess is you could also do this with Kitty Pryde or Professor X. I personally did it with Quicksilver. It's pretty much a bog standard Thing fight, besides unblockable specials and oscillate. So you want to get your slow up as quickly as possible. He has no means of getting rid of your slow. He has no means of kind of shrugging it off or anything like that. So once it's up until you get reset to 0 momentum charges or whatever it's called. Obviously, go for your detonations with L3s or L2s. I personally prefer L2s, just because I don't like how the fight can sometimes get out of control when you use your L3. And yes, you have that stun, but I find him really weird to play when you're moving like that quickly while the opponent is stunned. And also, I just don't like how much power it gives them. So I personally prefer the L2 rotation. It's a very safe fight. It was a solo. To be clear, everything up to now has been a solo so far. So if you play like me, which again, it's not that hard. I'm really not that good at the game. You should still have used 0 revives. Next up is Korg. Now, Korg is probably your first really difficult fight you're going to encounter here. I think you can very easily get it in 1 revive, and you can probably pretty easily get it in no revives, get the solo if you have a 200% mutant power back boost. Personally, I had a 150%. I still managed to get the solo, but that's also the first time I've ever gotten the solo on Korg, so I'm not going to act like I have it down to a science or anything. Again, similar scenario with MCoC is you want to be using your falter as a currency in order to gain power, in order to gain channeling charges. And always remember, you can reduce the cooldown on your falter by 1 second every time you dex, and obviously So, okay, sure, you don't want to really dex with Korg, but with his L1s, if you can get the timing down, you're theoretically reducing it by 3 seconds every time he launches off his L1. So normally you have pretty decent uptime on that falter. You want to use your L3s, obviously, because if you've used Professor X for a few fights at this point, like I did, that L3 is going to give you a lot of prowess. It's going to be really great value. And if you have a mutant power back boost, like a 200%, 150% wasn't really sufficient for me in order to do the whole strategy of just chaining L2s over and over again. But I think 200% will be effective enough to do that. You should be able to get the fight done, no problem. Again, you can also do that with Kitty Pryde. It's just a longer fight, and I only recently ranked up Kitty, and I'm still not very comfortable with her. One of the core reasons I brought her into this Gauntlet run was because I wanted a trial by fire with her to really get comfortable with her so I can use her effectively in Battlegrounds. And yeah, I feel a lot more comfortable with her now. But anyways, there are plenty of video guides up on YouTube for how to actually handle that Korg with Kitty Pryde or Professor X. I encourage you to check any and all of them out. They'll probably do a far better job showing off the fight and actually explaining the science of it than I would, because again, I've only gotten the solo this one time. Next up is Dragon Man. You can use Quicksilver for this. I use Quicksilver for this. You can do Overseer as well, but that likely won't be a solo. You could also probably use Kitty Pryde and just phase the damage from the L3s, but again, I think that's a lot harder to get the solo on than it is with Quicksilver. With Quicksilver, obviously, especially if he's awakened, you can stack up a lot of withers. And if you can stack up enough withers, you can actually make his power charge work against him to the point where he's just constantly draining power, and that's really, really nice. Now, a while back, I think Vega also made a video showing off the fights he took in Gauntlet with Quicksilver. Vega of MCoC, that is, great friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. But anyways, and he got the solo on it too, and he was talking about how he wasn't sure if he could get the trade-off, or what the trade-off was between either letting the L1 hit you, or hit your block in order to get that ineptitude and to get the free regen, or if he should just dex it, stack on the withers, and make it power drain. Now, in my experience, what you kind of want to do, and what I did in the fight, and this actually allowed me to start the fight at about 40%, and I finished it out at 80%, was when he has that power charge at first, for the first special one you're baiting, let him hit your block, get that ineptitude, get that free regen. But then, if you already have the ineptitude on you, try to dex as many hits of the special as possible. And remember, even if you want to block a few hits, and even if you're going to block a few hits in order to get the ineptitude and that free willpower healing, you can always dash out of some of the other hits. So take maybe the first or second hit of Dragon Man's special one to your block, get the ineptitude for free willpower healing, and then after that I found you could still pretty comfortably dex another 1 or 2 hits of it, and do withers through that at least. Now, what also makes Quicksilver really great for this fight is the fact that his withers pause whenever the opponent launches a special attack, or I think it's all his debuffs, I don't know, but his withers definitely pause whenever the opponent launches a special attack. And obviously, since Dragon Man not only has his power charge, but because he has, what's that node called? Because he also has Aspect of Evolution, his combat power rate is continually increasing. He's going to be getting a special. He's going to be getting more and more often, more and more quickly as the fight goes on. And so your withers are just going to be paused pretty much all of the time, and you're going to have no trouble whatsoever keeping them up, even if you aren't dexing all that much. Now, next up was Black Panther Civil War. Black Panther Civil War was the first I actually had to use a revive on, but I can say with near absolute confidence you could very easily get the solo on that. I only actually died when he was down to 10% with Kitty Pryde, and then I had to use a revive, and it was really sad, but hey, that's the solo. The way you want to play it is, obviously, there's a little bit.
So, Future Fell coming at you real quick. I take it you probably heard my voice sounding very robotic in that last tangent about Dragon Man. Trust me, it only gets worse. So, we are going to re-record this. Anyways, on to Black Panther Civil War. Now you can see with him, the really big node we got to work, or really big 2 nodes we have to worry about are Armored Assault and Footloose. Now, Armored Assault, obviously, is going to be unblockable a lot. That's easy enough to play around. But Footloose, he's going to be gaining an Evade and an Unstoppable every time he launches a special, right? Obviously, our team doesn't really have a surefire way to counter that besides Quicksilver, but I don't really love Quicksilver for this matchup. Honestly, you could probably use Quicksilver for it, but I didn't. I used Kitty Pryde, and Kitty Pryde can also do it. The strategy you really want to use with her, or the strategy I used with her, is just 3-hit phase, backdrafts. That's mostly fine. Now, I will admit this is also the first fight I had to spend a revive on, I got him down to 10% with Kitty, and then I fumbled it because I got backed into a corner and I died. But it's very soloable, and I am confident that you are probably more skilled than me, and you can probably get a solo on that with Kitty. Now, the important things to remember about this fight are that you want to have Black Panther in his corner of the arena as much as possible, because you want to make sure you have all of the space in the world to play passive and to dash back and to just avoid him after he launches his special attacks. What's going to screw you over is if you give him too much space and he launches off a special when you're on your side of the arena. If that happens, that's how you get in situations like the one I got into, and that's how you die. Besides that, keep him in his corner of the arena, launch off your L3 like normal with Kitty to gain temperature, and then knock him out in a few L2s. It's a fine old fight. Professor X can do this too. If you have Mutant 200% power back boost, it's even easier. I think I've even seen some gameplay of him doing it. I'm sure you can find it too. I personally used Kitty, and what I just said, that's the strategy you want to use with him. Next up, you have Nightcrawler and Spider-Gwen. These are both really easy Professor X fights. Nightcrawler, he has pretty much nothing to him whatsoever with Professor X. You're just going to want to play standard, parry and heavy your way to 25 channeling charges to get the vigilance, so you don't need to worry about his evade chance. Past that, if you have a Mutant 200% power boost, you can just nuke him down with that cheese of launching your specials over and over again. Even if not, it's a few cycles with Professor X's regular kind of usage case. And if you do that, you'll be completely fine. This is probably the easiest fight in all of Gauntlet, frankly. Next up is Spider-Gwen. This is kind of similar to Nightcrawler, except obviously she has Window of Opportunity stun and One Eye Open, which means no parries. Honestly, I would advise you to just play this fight like it's stun immune. That's how I did it. So what you're going to want to do here is just play passive with Professor X for the first, 10 seconds, I think it is, of the fight before he gets his falter charge. Again, you're going to want to use your falter like a currency. In this case, you're going to want to use it to get channeling charges. So just play passive as hell until you can get that falter up, and then throw off a few heavies to get your 25 charges you need for the vigilance. After that, hit her block, bait out her heavies, play normally like that, launch off a few L2s. If you have Mutant Power Back boost, it's even quicker. If not, just remember not to stun and you'll be completely fine. The only piece of advice I'd give is once you get to the end of your channeling or your mind control phase, if you're not doing the Mutant 200% power boost strat, try to time your last L1 of your mind control phase to just as your mind control phase is expiring. Because if you do that, you can launch it off during the mind control to get the unblockable, to get all damage bonus, all that. But then you can kind of use Professor X's idle animation after he launches his special to build about 18 charges before you dash back. 18 out of the 25, you obviously need to shut down her evade. And if your Professor X is awakened like mine, the extra charges you just passively gain every second from his awakened ability should get you to 25 in no time. Besides that, this is a really easy fight. This shouldn't give you any problems whatsoever. Next up is Domino. This is the main reason we have Nimrod on the team, just to make sure we have no Domino shenanigans to worry about. Again, this is a pretty easy fight. Obviously, Nimrod's a tech champ. He can't be unlucky, so you don't need to worry about that. You can dex all fine and dandy. One of the nodes is Power Shield, and that means you're going to want to really go for Nimrod's special 2s. Now, you might be tempted to try to go for an L1, L2 cycle so that you could have that energy vulnerability passive on Domino and that, I forgot the name, Energize buff on yourself. Don't do that, because even if you do that, even if you put that all into place before launching off your L2, it's still not going to kill her in one special. At most, I think it does about 70% from my testing on past runs, whereas launching your L2 with no energy vulnerability, no Energize, none of that stuff, that's already going to do about 50% of her health. So even if you go for the L1, L2 cycle, you're still going to need to do 2 of those, and if you just go for L2s, you only need to do 2 of those. Or you still just need to do 2 of those. So it's faster to just do 2 L2s rather than ramping with your L1 and then using an L2. Besides that, watch out for Limber, bait out a bunch of heavies, watch out for her Lucky and being able to evade you, and this should be a fine fight, honestly. Next up is Mojo. This is why Quicksilver is here. And this is why we couldn't just stick with Overseer, because obviously Overseer does gain buffs that Mojo can cause to expire really quickly. Quicksilver is not buff immune, but he does not gain the precision from the dexterity mastery, which means there are a lot less buffs for Mojo to be dealing with. It can still be a dangerous fight if you let it go on long enough. Towards the end of the fight, it's pretty likely that you will get 1 or 2 hater buffs on you that he will turn into degens and you'll take a bit of damage. But that should be compensated for by the fact that you're going to be regenning the entire fight from Mojo's staggers the node puts on you. Now, if you play it right, you can still pretty much finish this fight on the same amount of health you started. I said earlier I was at 80% health with my Quicksilver after that Dragon Man fight. I'm pretty sure I finished the Mojo fight around that same amount of health. Yeah, you want to use Quicksilver from this. I think Vega also had, in that same video I was talking about of Vega's earlier, where he was showcasing how he used Quicksilver and Gauntlet for fights like Dragon Man. He did also take a Mojo fight. He took it really well. He pulled it through. He got the solo. And if you want to actually see it, I would encourage you to go check out that video. I'll leave it in the description. But all you really want to remember with this is, obviously he has a node that'll auto-complete his prompts, but you do not want to be speeding that along. Try not to perform the actions that are in his prompts, honestly. But besides that, you should be fine. Just try to get it done quick enough before he starts getting a lot of followers and starts putting hater buffs on you. Quicksilver should have it covered, though. Last on this path, we have Immortal Abomination. Now, this is the other reason we want Overseer, because, well, Overseer is poison immune, and every time Overseer would gain, or would suffer a debuff or an effect that he's immune to, he gains one of his Gamma charges, as well as, if you have him awakened, inflicting a burst of retaliation damage on the opponent. Now, mine is pretty low sig, so that damage isn't very much, but damage is damage. And honestly, the Gamma charges are more important anyways. Because I-Bomb's going to constantly be putting poisons on you, you're going to be ramping incredibly quickly, you're going to be in cosmic mode for most of the fight. But my advice would still just be to play it slow. It's a very safe fight, but the only way you could potentially get into hot water is if you really get backed into the corner while you have one of those disorient passives on you, because if you, or well, debuffs on you. Because if you do have one of those disorient debuffs on you, you're going to be taking a lot of block damage. Additionally, don't worry about him launching off his L2 unless you have one of those disorient debuffs on you. I think I ended up pushing him to an L2 when I had a disorient on me, and it didn't kill me or anything, but it did like 40% of my max health. I regenerated it back in the end, and honestly it sped up the fight even more just because of how often he was trying to put poisons on me. But still, I don't think it's worth the risk. If you can avoid him launching his L2, especially when you have a disorient on you, please do so. Besides that, it's a fine fight. You'll be okay. Nimrod can also work for this, not quite as well, but he still does. I'm sure you can find footage of either of them taking the fight on YouTube, so go wild. Now, onto the final path. We're starting off with Apocalypse. This is just a Nimrod fight. It's easy as hell. It's a bog standard Nimrod fight, pretty much. Don't let electric fluctuations worry you. Remember, Nimrod is immune to ability accuracy modification from mutant champions, so this is doing nothing to him. Literally nothing. The only way this could go wrong is if you accidentally take a heavy attack, which Apoc will try to apply bleed to you, and then you'll take an Incinerate instead from Coolant Leak. But just don't get heavy, I guess. My apologies. It should be fine, though. You should be completely fine. It should be a bog standard Nimrod fight. You should get it down easy. I think I lost like 5% health over this entire fight, so you'll be okay. You'll get it done. I'm pretty sure Professor X and Kitty can both also do that fight, though don't quote me on that. I think I've seen it, but maybe I'm just misremembering. Sasquatch, you have Overseer and you have Quicksilver for this. Overseer, admittedly, I didn't realize this during my run, but in hindsight, I could have used Overseer for this. I was a bit worried about, oh, he gains buffs, and that's going to do Power Snack. And then I remembered that Power Snack tries to nullify your buffs, Overseer is immune to nullify, and then nothing happens with that. So you can actually use Overseer for this. And then if you use Overseer, don't worry about Power Snack, you'll be completely fine. Just make sure you have Max Despair, because he doesn't have that many debuffs, but he has enough of those special concussions that it should be able to shut you down. Nah, why are you requesting an invite? I'm sorry, this is a tangent, but Nah has invited, I've asked Nah to do friendlies so often, why is he only now inviting me? I'm sorry. back to the topic at hand. Personally, I used Quicksilver for this. The only thing you really need to be aware of if you're using Quicksilver for it is, one, Hard Knock Life. Try not to take too many blocked hits or the damage will stack up, especially because Quicksilver isn't the tankiest. But besides that, it's honestly a completely fine fight. Only other thing to remember is make sure that once Sassy hits his kind of 30% regen craziness phase, you have plenty of whiplashes up on him, because then that'll just completely mitigate the healing. Or alternatively, just completely circumvent that 30% phase by like nuking him down with 90 whiplash charges or something, and that'll just absolutely obliterate him. Quicksilver excels at these kinds of fights. You shouldn't have an issue with this. And now for those two troublesome fights I mentioned a lot earlier. First off, you're going to have Killmonger on your hands. Now, if you look at his nodes, he has Polka Dot Power. You're not going to be gaining any power unless you apply damaging debuffs. Sharpened Claws, so you kind of don't want to block. But then you're thinking, oh, I have a robot, I'll be fine. Nope, he has cutting wires. So even worse to block with a robot, because then you're going to be taking a big boy shock debuff. So that puts that, or that rules out Nimrod and most of these other guys, frankly, except Kitty. You're not going to be gaining any specials. No, you're not going to gain any power. You're not going to be able to launch off any specials no matter which of these champions you use. So your best bet is Kitty. And all you want to do there is make use of your phase, your awakened ability that mitigates damage while you're phasing. That way you don't have to worry about reverb damage. Don't worry too much about taking blocked hits, though ideally try to avoid it. I tried to avoid it to the best of my ability. If you take a blocked hit, just try to activate your phase so you don't take that damage and you actually regen a bit from willpower. The only other thing to be aware of with Killmonger is, or the only other things to be aware of with Killmonger are, one, try to push him to his L2s. One, those are far easier to dex, and also then you don't have to worry about his counterpunch charges. When you're playing Kitty Pryde with that kind of backdraft play style, it's always a risk that he could just get really passive and start blocking a lot. So if you accidentally hit into his block, oh no, he's unstoppable now. Granted, you should still be fine just because Kitty should be phased when he reacts to that. Then he'll actually take some direct damage from hitting you while you're phasing. But honestly, I would just try to avoid that altogether if I were you. Try to always push him to his L2 rather than his L1. Make use of a relic if you can to extend your combo and to give him more power to push him to those L2s. And similar to the Black Panther Civil War fight, actually, try not to get backed into your corner. I had to use one revive on this fight, and the reason I had to use one revive is because, again, I was backed into the corner when he had about 30% left on him. So again, it is a very soloable fight. I'm confident that most of you guys can probably do it, because again, I just suck, seriously. But you got this. Use Kitty, play well, play passive. Focus on finishing the fight alive rather than finishing it quick, and you will be completely fine. Now, this is the last really troublesome fight you have in the entire quest, and probably the most troublesome fight, I want to say, is this Void. Now, I think you could theoretically solo this, or I know you can solo it with Professor X, because I've seen people solo with Professor X, provided you have a mutant 200% power back boost. But if you don't, or you don't want to do that, like me, I used Kitty. And if you had a Kitty from 100%, you could also probably solo this. Because the way you want to play this is immediately get enough prowess to activate your phase by parrying, doing a few hits, getting your 3 prowess. And then you just want to start doing 3-hit backdraft intercept combos, right? Because remember, you're going to be taking no damage while you're phased, and that means you can circumvent all of the massive direct damage you'd be taking from long distance relationship, those weakness debuffs obviously interacting with Void's kit, and his natural debuffs even stacking on top of that, of course. As long as you're phased, you won't be taking any damage from that. So nah, shut up, go away. He's gonna see this video, I hope, and then he's, I want, sorry, I'm getting off track here. Anyways, just do those 3-hit backdraft intercept combos. And the other thing you want to be aware of is, obviously he's Incinerate immune, so there's no use using your L1, there's no use using your L3. You just want to be focusing on those L2s. If you can launch off an L2 with 20 prowess, my rank 4 Kitty Pryde was able to do, I think, about half of his health with a single L2. So even if you don't play it from 100%, if you can only get one L2 off per kind of try at Void, That's only 1 revive if you play it right. Me personally, I had to use 2 revives just because one of my runs, I just completely bottled it. But it's honestly completely fine. The other thing you want to do is whenever Void uses his special 1, avoid the first hit of it, but when he kind of throws his dark ball at you, phase into that so you can go through it and immediately start comboing him. Because 1, that'll make sure you keep your combo count up, that'll make sure you're purifying his natural Fear of the Void debuffs. But it'll also, 1, give you prowess, and 2, give you power, because you want to be racing up to your L2. Me personally, I also didn't heal my kitty, so the way I basically did this was just 3 shots at Void with a kitty that was at like 20%. First run, 20% kitty, got the special 2, awesome. Second run, 20% revive on kitty, didn't make it. Third one, 20% revive on kitty, and I actually got the L2 off and killed him. So if you have potions and you plan better than I did, you should be able to get a solo on this. Or it's at least possible to get a solo on this, or a 1 revive run. Either way, so far, even with my awful play, I only used 4 revives this entire quest. If you play better than me, you can probably bring that down to 1 or even 0. This is an absolutely amazing team for Gauntlet. But I should probably talk about Nick Fury. Sorry. Nick Fury, there's nothing really to worry about. This is a pretty easy kitty fight. I know Professor X can also do this, especially if you have a 200% mutant power back boost. But again, I did not. The way you want to play this with Kitty Pride is mostly bog standard, L3s for your passive Incinerate, ramp up your temperature, throw off a big boy L2. The only thing you want to remember is with Kinetic Transference, whenever Nick Fury throws his special 1, don't take that to your block. Phase into it, both so you can gain a lot of power, but also so that he doesn't gain a lot of power. Also beware that if he has enough tactical charges, he will just completely circumvent your miss, both in his L1 and in his basic attacks. If he catches you with a basic combo, he might do a light combo ender, which puts that massive bleed on you. If that happens, don't panic. Make sure you are phased for as much of that as possible. Because if you aren't, even a single tick gets through, you're going to take pretty significant damage. Besides that, don't stress too much about it. You won't really have to interact with Lionheart, and Vigor actually doesn't heal him for that much. Kitty Pride can outdamage that, so you'll be completely fine. Then moving on to Thanos, you should be completely fine with this as well. I didn't have to use any revives on him, I just kind of threw my entire team at him. The only thing I'll say for Thanos is manipulate the AI as much as possible. Try to hold your block a lot, try to bait heavies a lot. I did that, and I ended up getting like his entire final 30% phase done with Nimrod alone, just by the merit of he only used like 2 L3s on me, because I just blocked so often and worked my way to my L2 over and over again to inflict those really big shocks on him. But Nameless Thanos should be completely fine. That's not your concern. So looking at all this, you've just done Gauntlet, or I've just done Gauntlet, and you will now be able to do Gauntlet in under 5 revives, and if you play well, under 3. It's a really efficient team. It'll get it done really quickly for a very good price without Hercules, because screw Hercules, I actually have principles. And yeah, if you guys like this guide, comment down below, give it a like. I might actually stream my second run, because as you can see, I still have 1 more key. I might live stream my second run with this same team, or if you guys have any alterations, go ahead and suggest them. I might try them out as well, let you know how that goes. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you were informed by this. Again, I will leave the link to Vega's video that I was talking about with him using Quicksilver in the description. It's really informative. It'll probably go through his specific fights a lot better than I did, just because Vega also had the gameplay of those fights. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Stealing from Vega right there. Yeah, good luck with Gauntlet. Have a good one. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.